Hey guys, to help run the forums, host the website, and travel, we've introduced a universal service fee for in-depth coverage, including this video. My goal is to be unbiased and transparent. It's a privilege to serve you. This is not an endorsement. Let's get into it. We are back in Long Beach. Got another wonderful evening hanging out with Chris Nolte of Propel Bikes.
Hey guys.
We've been going through the Riese Müller lineup, and we've made it to a new model. This is new to the US, the first year that they've had it here. What do they call this, Chris?
So this is the Culture. Yeah, so it's been for many years existing in Europe, but This is the first year coming over here. Okay. And it's a totally redesigned bike, so it's introduced in its newest iteration.
This is really interesting to me because I love comfort. Full suspension bikes tend to be what I ride. I ride a mountain bike around town just for that reason, for full suspension. But Riese Müller does an excellent job with, what is that called? It's their control technology.
That's right. Yeah, that's what they call all their bikes that are full suspension. It's control technology, and the idea that it's not just about comfort, it's also about keeping the wheel on the ground and keeping you stable and safe, whether you're going over bumps or braking or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. But they've really... Go ahead.
Well, one of the ways that they often demonstrate that is actually like when you take a non-full suspension bike and when you actually like drop it on the ground, it bounces a lot. But when you take a suspension bike, it just kind of... Yeah, like... It really settles quickly, and that's kind of the same experience you have when you're riding and going over bumps.
I've never seen that demo before. That's kind of cool. And you'll notice that in this case we've got a front and rear rack. So let's say you put like a child carrier back here or something. You know, they're also going to benefit from that like suspension. It's going to be a little bit more comfortable for a kid, and
that's right. Nice. I mean, that's one of the challenges when you try to adopt a bike like a full suspension mountain bike. Having a rack that kind of works with that is there aren't really many out there, and so we used to do that quite often actually in the shop, take full suspension mountain bikes and adapt them more for the street and that sort of thing. But since Riese Müller introduced their bikes, it's much more common that we just recommend a bike that's built for that purpose.
Yeah.
And they're kind of unique in that way. You know, having that rack that's built into the frame that's also suspended, so the rack is also taking advantage of the benefits that you're getting as a rider.
Yeah, that's great demos, man. And I like the style of this. You can see that this silver color, they didn't paint the pannier blocker that color, so you get these nice like beautiful lines. This bike, to me, it's kind of elegant. Riese Müller is a German company. They started out with like a full suspension folding bike, and then they introduced a line of e-bikes that eventually became exclusively Bosch.
Correct. Right? Yeah. Well, actually, when they started, they did, you know, the Birdie, which is their full suspension bike they introduced in the early 90s. And then they started to get requests for full-size bikes. They started doing full-size bikes. When e-bikes kind of became a thing, they started to add e-bike systems to their bikes. And once they started working with Bosch, it was just kind of a match made in heaven. And they're both in kind of the same area of Germany. But at that time, shortly after they started working with Bosch, they made the decision to only do electric bikes for their full-size bikes.
Except the Birdie.
Except the
They
Birdie.
still have the Birdie, guys, and it is cool. It doesn't have quite as many features as we see here. I mean, we've got the Gates Carbon CDX, so has that center track design. It's not going to come off. Really nice little Curana. So this is like plastic and aluminum, a little bit tougher than just plastic, won't rattle around as much. That's going to keep your pants or your dress ends clean. This is a step-through model. Comes in 3 different frame sizes. Only this one color, which, you know, it's like, okay. You know, back here we've got a couple of drivetrain options, but we're looking at the Enviolo, which is formerly like kind of the New Vinci. It's still powered by New Vinci, but it's a continuously variable transmission. And, you know, they call this the Vario, right? So GT Vario, and GT meaning like, okay, a little bit wider tires, like Grand Touring, right?
That's right, yeah.
And then Vario, like continuously variable transmission.
Right. Yeah, we still haven't got a clear answer where that came from exactly, whether it's the Spanish translation or, you know, Italian translation, but yeah, it's the variable transmission.
Well, and this thing is cool. You can shift it at standstill, so we've got this half grip twister, and they've got that little infographic, so you can make the guy or girl like on the flats, and that's going to go faster. That's like a high gear. Or you can make it a hill, and that helps you climb. So it's very intuitive, and that's like a low gear. And it's got 380 degrees of kind of gearing ratio. Okay, so the equivalent would be if you had like a 10 tooth to 38 tooth cassette. So it's a 380 degree. That's pretty good. A lot of times I'll see like 11 to 36 or 11 to 42. Sometimes it's 14 to 28, which is a pretty small range. So this is a decent range of gearing options. It's the Bosch CX motor, so it's a 20 mile per hour Class 1 electric bike. They don't sell this in Class 3, which is speed pedelec, and you'll see that in a lot of the other HS models from Riese Müller. So we were talking about the differences between this and the Homage.
Right. So that would be kind of the most closely linked model family, would be the Homage. And the Homage has some upgrades in comparison to this bike, and it's made for a different rider, and that's really their idea, that every bike has its own concept. So the Homage has the air springs, slightly upgraded light in comparison, and then some different options, like you could do dual battery.
You can't do dual battery on this one. No high speed.
And you can also have the roll off, as you were talking about. This is 380 degrees gear range. The roll-off goes to 526, so it's a much more significant.
That's like 10
range.
to 52 teeth instead of 10 to 38. So again,
Right.
you just have more pedaling options, potentially for that high-speed operation.
Exactly.
Okay, and then I want to, one thing I've noticed, just to be fair, this is like 5 pounds for that CVT unit, compared to a cassette and derailleur, which they do offer. That's like the touring version. That's going to be maybe just a couple pounds. So you get 3 extra pounds of weight. That's unsprung weight, because the rear of the bike goes up and down. And there's the shot of the rear suspension. So it's a spring. It does have kind of preload, and there's preload adjust and compression adjust up front, 100 millimeters of travel. But coming back to that being a little bit heavier, okay, maybe the shifting isn't quite as instantaneous. You're not going to have to worry about like mashing and grinding of gears, because it's just this really fluid. You can shift at standstill if you want to. But the Bosch system does have shift detection, so I feel like that's kind of like, even if you do get the touring version with the 11 speed, it's going to hold up pretty well. But it might pedal a little bit more efficiently. Like sometimes there's this feeling, like kind of a sluggish feeling I've noticed on kind of the Enviolo.
Right. Yeah, that's something that comes up a lot. The Enviolo, or previously Nuvinci, is slightly less efficient in comparison to a derailleur or the roll-off hub, but there are many benefits, one of them being low maintenance.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that a lot of people don't always realize is that when you first get the bike, it takes a little while for the hub to break in. So when you're first starting out with it, it might not be as efficient as it will be after 500 miles or so.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good to know. Thank you for the feedback, Chris, because you've carried all 3 of these drivetrains
sure.
on the Riese Müller lineup and some other brands that you carry, and it's neat to hear. A lot of times I'm using brand new bikes, so go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing I just mentioned about now they rebranded as Enviolo, powered by Nuvinci, but this is a 380 SE, and the SE is specifically made to be able to handle a little bit more torque. And so there might be slightly different power profiles on some of the more on some of the newer bikes and that sort of thing, and so Enviolo is specifically making their bikes to work with, say, like the Bosch CX motor and that sort of stuff.
It's a perfect
really cool.
segue, man. I mean, we were talking about Riese Müller. They pretty much only do like the Performance Line CX or the Performance Line Speed. And with the CX, this is kind of like an e-mountain bike motor, but it's nice to have on a bike like this that weighs a little bit more. This is 71, maybe 0.2, 0.5 pounds. It's definitely a little bit heavier, and the power tube does tend to add some weight. The bikes are overbuilt. They don't flex as much, even though this is like a wave step through, so it's really easy to approach. You can see that they've got these extra plates, and there's just a lot of extra strengthening happening here. So with that extra weight, it's nice to have a high strength motor, up to 75 Newton meters of torque, which happens to be what the SE Enviolo is rated to. So I think there's definitely like some synergy there between the two companies. This motor is listening to rear wheel speed, pedal cadence, and pedal torque, a signal over 1,000 times per second. It's just really responsive. So when you start pedaling and stop, like, it's not going to feel out of control. It's also not going to make you strain your knees or really have to work very hard to get started, especially if you are starting in a low gear. And since you can shift this at standstill, that's very easy to do. So it's a really good setup. Again, it does have shift detection, so if you decide on the cassette and the derailleur, it's gonna hold up pretty well. Still easy to maybe ideal to ease off a little bit when you're shifting gears to give it some it makes shifting easier. Like if you're really pedaling hard on this and you're trying to shift, you're gonna feel like, oh, it's hard because you're fighting the system. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick background on that motor. If you're in the lower levels of assist, you're getting like 50% support, and then all the way up to 300% support. And there's some really cool drive modes, EMTB, that I'm going to talk about later, but I want to go through some of the rest of the specs here. So we've got these wider rims with the reinforcement eyelets. That's going to add some strength. Nice black spokes, black rims, black hubs, black accessories. A lot of cabling is internally routed. Once it comes off the light, it sort of bundles with the rest of these wires here, and it goes into the tube, so you're not going to have those brushing up against your legs when you're pedaling or getting snagged. Pretty good wire management up here. There is the basket, and you could maybe wire through the back. I do want to call out that this basket's pretty cool. It's like 6.6 pounds of weight capacity. It's got this plastic base, which is the same plastic they're using in a lot of their cargo bucket areas now as an option. Got a couple of bungee cords here. We've got the light mounted, so it points where you steer. But when you park, if you don't have the kickstand in a very high position and the bike's kind of tipping and you've got some weight in there, could tip to the side and kind of dump your gear out. It also adds a little bit of work to steering. Okay, so if you're steering this and there's a 6-pack or something in there, it's just going to add a little bit of weight. Not the end of the world. I like that it is sprung, that it's not, the light, the rack, they aren't down here like on the moving portion of the fork. That's good. You'll see there is a bracket here and then a mounting position. So this demo bike actually is missing a little piece, and you might see this basket vibrating a bit on our ride test, but don't worry about it. That's just because this one's still kind of a demo unit. Then we come down to the lowers. This is an SR Suntour fork, and you'll notice they've painted over the branding. So it really comes back to those nice, beautiful lines I was talking about. I love that they've got reflectors built in. We've got the headlight with cutouts on the side. This is 70 lux, so it's not quite as nice as Chris was saying as the Supernova M99 Mini on the Homage bike. Little bit down spec, but still a nice light. It still has this like metal housing and the side cutouts. That's a lot nicer than I see a lot of other bikes. And then we've got a 15 millimeter through axle with quick release. We've got 180 millimeter hydraulic disc brakes with dual piston calipers, a little bit larger pistons in there, and then these awesome tires. So these are the Marathon all motion performance. They've got reflective sidewall stripes. They've got puncture protection. They're a little bit narrower than the Homage. So it's 27.5 by 2.15 versus 2.4. So the lower volume is a little bit lighter, a little bit more efficient, but maybe not quite as stable, not quite as comfortable. So there's a slightly maybe down spec, or maybe that's for the type of riding you're doing. If you don't have 2 batteries, maybe you aren't touring with this. This is just an excellent commuting platform. You've still got a roughly 500 watt hour power tube battery that we're going to get to in a minute. Here's the charging port and stuff. You can charge it on or off the bike. It locks. It's got an ABUS locking core, which is actually keyed to match this awesome alarm lock that I also want to show you. We got the Bibia sort of adjustable strap here for quickly securing items, and then there's the rack time like quick click system here for different accessories. Just phenomenal. We've got an integrated light in the back as well, this top light. Some reflectors, these 65 millimeter plastic fenders front and rear. They're going to keep you dry. They don't rattle a whole lot. Nice adjustable kickstand that stays out of the way. 10 millimeter axle back here, threaded with bolts. That's just kind of standard. 135 millimeter hub spacing and 100 up front. That's standard. So this bike, the wheels, the axles, everything is going to be a little bit more traditional. It's not using boost. It's not getting crazy with like plus size tires or anything, but they are larger and kind of wider than a lot of other commuting bikes that I see. And then just having that suspension, I mean, for me personally, that makes all the difference in the world. This is a nice gel saddle from Sully Royale with a thicker, this is 34.9 millimeter seat post. So that means you could, adjust that or get maybe a really tall one if you wanted, and then combine that with a larger bike because they have those 3 frame sizes. There's so many options. These swept back handlebars up here, and we've got this Ergotech stem that's really angled up. So this is an upright, maybe even an upright relaxed body position. Ergon GP1, locking ergonomic grips, 4-finger Magura hydraulic brake levers to pair with those Magura brakes that we saw a minute ago. Just really beautiful. Plenty of cargo capacity. This is sort of like a do-anything city bike, in my opinion. And that's why we're at the park, because we've been cruising around. We're feeling comfortable. I feel like that's a good summary. And Chris, I'm really excited to see maybe the battery here real quick, and then
yeah, for sure,
do the lock.
This is, by the way, this is an ABIS Plus key. So generally they're going to be key-to-like to the lock that comes with the bike, and you can always add on additional locks at your dealer or that sort of thing. We do that quite often.
There we go.
And so there's this little kind of latch here, so you want to just kind of push your thumb in there and pull it out just like that.
Huh.
So you see this kind of folds back there, so you can access it. So you don't have to like kind of pull the whole thing back. You can just kind of push it in with your thumb.
It's neat that you have access to this bay, and I've heard some shops explain that this makes it a little bit easier to service. They can kind of tighten the brackets. That keeps the battery really, really low, and it sort of disguises the bike a little bit. On the older Riese Müller models, they would have external batteries that you might kick when you were hopping on, and I think that's part of that rubberized cover. They've really done a nice job.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
Yeah, and you still have the power indicator here, which we're a little low on battery at the moment.
You can charge it off the bike, so if you're someone who lives in a really cold or hot environment, it's good to sort of store the bike maybe separately from the battery and keep the battery. Definitely don't drop it. 6.3 pounds, so it's slightly heavier than the power pack. And power packs look like this, just in case you're not familiar. They're these plastic ones, and they have a nice little loop at the top. That makes them a little easier to carry, and again, slightly lighter, but the appearance of this and the protection that you get with an integrated battery, a lot of the companies are going this way, especially on premium bikes. And this bike does cost a little bit more, Chris. So I think, what are we, $62.89?
That's right. Yeah, for the Vario version, $62.89, and I think the touring version is like $56, I believe. So yeah. So I think this bike, it's $600 or $700 more than the Nevo, which is the hardtail version. And then up from there to go to the Homage, you're going to be another, $400 or $500, depending on the option that you choose.
There's a lot of overlap. And it sort of depends on which drivetrain. So if you're really set on the Enviolo, you're going to pay a little bit more, but you have choices whether you want to go with a hardtail, but you really want the Enviolo, or maybe you're like me and I really want the suspension. I'm willing to sacrifice the drivetrain and just get, Shimano Dior cassette derailleur, and that's what we keep saying, touring. That's what we mean. That's like the entry-level price point. But it's cool. They overlap, and I think Riese Müller tends to be a little bit more expensive because of the quality, but you're also getting that like built to order, and there's a little bit of a delay sometimes because they're shipping over your custom bike from Germany, so it could be 1 to 3 months.
That's right. Yeah, so they're building the bikes to order, and it all depends on the scheduling of everything like that, and they're growing quite a bit. I mean, they're actually opening a new facility this January, so they have a new building being built. It's almost complete at this point, but they've been growing so much every year that they made it necessary to do that.
A lot of interest.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy these. Does it come with the flick bell here too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, standard.
That's fun. Some of the speed ones now have like a little like horn that's built in. So we did the battery here. We showed that. Again, most of the weight on this bike is low and center, the drivetrain weight, and I think that's awesome. Let's do the lock, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So basically, you have this mount for the lock. This is a new mount from ABIS, which is really nice.
And we learned the other day that, a lot of times I'm calling out like no bottle cage bosses and stuff, because I like the ability to mount your own lock or to have a mini pump or a bottle. But if you look underneath this bracket, there are bosses, so you can actually put a drink holder like right there. And I thought that was so cool, in addition to just trunk bags with little holsters or saddle bags and stuff.
The one thing I'm just looking at, you want to be careful not to put anything too low up there, down there though, because the suspension, when it's fully compressed, you might actually,
it could get kind of close. So. That's a good point. Thank you. So
I was just picking up on that.
I'm always trying to be like, what are the cons here? And this is just a deep overview, but make this as review-like as possible, because we both have a lot of experience with bikes, and I appreciate your integrity of kind of calling that out so that customers don't. So that's one of the trade-offs. Maybe you end up with a drink holder up here or something. I feel like there are lots of options, but no, they don't have bottle cage bosses right here. Okay, so show me this baby. What is this thing? This is about 3.1 pounds, right?
It is, yeah. So, included in that weight is the lock is in there as well.
Yeah, the 71-pound bike includes all the racks, the battery, the lock. That's how we weigh them.
All these things add up. But so this is an alarm lock. Beyond the standard features that you have as just a lock, it's also an alarm. So right now it's kind of in this warning mode, and it tells you, just beeps. Now this is actually alarm mode.
Wait a minute, we just took it off the bike, so how did it get alarmed?
So because I actually unlocked it and locked it and kind of fussing with it a little bit. But
Yeah.
I guess we could do like a more of a standard demonstration, but if you were to kind of lock the bike and then kind of leave it in that locked position, takes a second to arm.
So this is you like at the coffee shop or whatever, you're leaving your bike, beep, beep, it's armed.
It's armed, just like a...
And then wait, I was taking, so that was it? That's all it had to do?
That's all it takes, just a little bit of movement. It's like, okay. Now, if it doesn't get bothered again, it won't go off. So that kind of like, you know, stop that. Maybe if you try to mess with it some more. Oh, so it's warning you
Another
again.
warning. No one's looking. I'm taking the bike. Oh boy. Oh boy. And this is rubberized, so it's really nice. Not going to scratch your bike up. There we go.
And that's it. Yeah.
That's how that works.
And the nice thing is when it is inside the rack, it doesn't go off. So I'm not sure exactly how they figured that out, but
It's like when it's all folded up or something?
I think when it's in this kind of folded position, they know that it's okay.
Avis does a good job. They gave me this helmet. It's been working really well. And they're one of the premium brands that's kind of come over from Germany again.
Yeah, they're made in Germany as well. And I mean, one of our favorite things about them is just the way that all these things work together, right? Because what we're really trying to do is find solutions, right? It's not just about like, oh, this bike's really cool. It's about like, how does it kind of fix these problems that I have in my life?
Yeah.
And you know, like one of the problems you might have is like having too many keys.
Yeah.
You can have one key and have multiple locks.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you're in kind of an environment where you need a little bit extra security, to have several locks, but one key is quite a nice thing.
That is really nice. Yeah, so coming back to like just how feature rich this bike is and how reliable it's going to be. You've got the warranty, you've got a shop that you're probably working with that can service it. I like that they've even got this little pulley wheel right here that raises the belt, and they've still got a slap guard here though, you know, and that's probably a carryover from if you get the touring drivetrain. The pedals are kind of like, meh, you know, they work okay. You're not going to cut your shins because they aren't sharp, but they're not as big and grippy as they could be. That's a cheap upgrade though if you want to. You know, I feel like we've gone through most of this, but I was going to show the control system up there. Does that sound good, Chris, or did I miss anything?
I think that you covered it pretty well.
Okay, cool. So we know the battery's in there. It's charged up, maybe not fully charged, but we've got a power button there. Before I do that, though, I want to show you how easy it is to take this off and that there's a micro USB port built in. So you could actually use this in combination with your phone or something. I think for now, they're only offering the Intuvia. Bosch does have another display panel called the Kiox. It's color, kind of neat. It's got like a battery percentage. It's got Bluetooth, and it could sync with your phone in the future, possibly. That app isn't out. Oh, and while we're up here, I haven't mentioned this on all the Riese Müller bikes, but these headsets have like kind of block locks, so they won't oversteer and bang into the side of the frame. They physically stop, and I think that is just such a cool feature, especially with like the basket. Okay, so I press the power button, boots up pretty quickly. It does have like a faint backlight, and we're getting into the evening, so we might see that more later. We've got a battery infographic with 1 tick right now, but there would be 5, 20% steps. That's where I feel like there could have been improvement. I wish they would have had a percentage. Then we've got assist level. Right now it's an off. This bike's going to be a bit difficult to pedal because it is new. The NVLO isn't really broken in. It's a heavier bike, so it's nice to get that little assist. We go up to eco mode or up to tour, sport, and turbo, and sport is EMTB, because remember we were talking about how this is a high torque like mountain bike motor basically, and EMTB gives you like 120% all the way to 300, and it's really based on how hard you're pushing. So if you're someone who doesn't want to be bothered with like controls, you just go to EMTB mode, and then it just sort of does its own thing. It works really well, and you can just shift the gears over here, or the CVT as it were. Speed in the middle, it's in miles per hour, but you could change that by holding reset and I and going into the settings menu. And then down here we've got all these different readouts. So right now it says trip distance, but if I press I here or over here, it's going to cycle through and show me clock, max speed, average speed, trip time, range. Range is dynamic, so if I click down to eco mode, range goes higher. It says, oh, 11 miles, but if I'm way up in turbo mode, it's using all that energy. Now it's only 3 miles. So this is going to help you get home without running out of batteries, you know. And yeah, it's running potentially the USB, the lights and everything. So it's nice to have that smart feedback, odometer, trip distance. So it just kind of loops around. There is a walk mode, and that only works if you're in one of the assist levels, but you press this little walk button on top of the control pad and then hold the plus button for a second, and the bike pushes itself. You know, I'm frequently talking about how this could be useful at like a craft fair, or maybe you've got this thing loaded up with groceries and stuff, and then the bike will push itself. You won't have to worry so much about, you know, trying to do it yourself and maybe, you know, balancing a child seat and everything. It's cool to have these features, and not every company has left them enabled. Okay, so we got the plus, the minus, the I button. I feel like this is so intuitive. Like, physically, you can feel there's like rubber here. You can feel that there's clicks when you press it. It's just a nice setup. One of my personal favorites. It's also pretty big, and with this raised stem, you get this nice view. So it's not like you're gonna be squinting and really having to lean in. It's just a good setup all around. You know, there's this club of like premium companies. I feel like Bosch is one, Riese Müller, Abus, some of these lights and stuff what we talked about. I was calling out the helmet for fun. You know, I do appreciate it. This one has like a light in the back, but it's black. So otherwise, usually I wear like a white helmet, or Chris has his blue helmet. I want to be seen. You know, I like the reflectors, I like the lights, I like, you know, the helmet thing. It's all like ties together to make this more of like a vehicle experience, something that you could rely on to get to work.
Right. And it's nice too when you can have kind of maybe those like more subtle details, like reflective sidewalls on the tire and that sort of stuff. So you don't necessarily need to have the bike maybe as loud, so you could still, you know, be comfortable dressed up on it or whatever the case may be.
And you mean visually loud, like all these colors.
Right.
So I mean, looks like a luxury sedan in some ways to me. You know, and the lines that we talked about, and it's just clean. It's up to you guys to decide, but there's frequently feedback of like, yeah, that's so expensive, you could buy a car. But in places like Long Beach or LA where parking is really tough, but they've got bike lanes, I mean, this could be like your car. It's going to be reliable.
I'd much rather be riding this than driving a car.
That's what you do here.
Yeah.
You ride your bike. That's like his car.
Well,
you guys, I mean, that's...
My wife's more often than
she's in that one.
She that's her favorite bike. She likes to carry the dog in there and that sort of thing. And
But it's fairly comparable to me to the Homage, unless you wanted the speed motor or some of those other little upgrades. This is very satisfying. I was coming into this review thinking like, oh, this is the cheap version, and then I was like, well, the price isn't actually that much different, and we didn't really lose that many features.
Right.
So, you know, I just feel like it's that in-between step. If you want to go just above the hardtail version that we were talking about, that's the Nevo.
I think that was their thought process internally as well, just to give somebody an option like, oh, I really like the Nevo. It seems to kind of be on like maybe the upper end of my price level, but maybe I can go just a little bit higher, or potentially make a choice on the drivetrain and maybe go with the touring version, save a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And even weight there as well.
That would probably be one of my, I'd be looking at like, well, do I want a CVT or a geared hub on the Nevo, or do I want full suspension, and then maybe I'll go with a cassette or something. It's neat to have those options, but you know, it adds the time on some of the build. And so there's these trade-offs here. But you know, it's nice to have these choices. You want to go grab your bike and I'll hop on this, and
let's do it.
We'll get going. So I kind of walk the bike over here, trying to show the walk mode and get away from that stereo speaker noise on the road. I'm going to take this up to EMTB mode. I like that mode a lot, and I'm just going to start pedaling and show you guys the motor. So even though I'm in the grass, it's not going to be a problem. It just takes right off. Oh boy. Handles really well. There aren't like a whole lot of bikes to choose from that have continuously variable transmissions or geared hubs and belt drives and a really nice mid drive. This thing it's efficient, it's really quiet. You can see that basket vibrating a little bit, but again, that's because we're kind of missing a bracket. And then a little bit of whining. So there are some trade-offs with the Bosch motors. This is like an 8.8 pound motor. It's one of the heavier ones, and it uses like a smaller, I think 26 tooth sprocket in this case. It spins at 2.5 revolutions per single crank revolution. So it's spinning a little bit faster to be quick, to be powerful, kind of makes it efficient for the drive system there. But there is a little bit of drag introduced there too. So if you're pedaling without assist, you know, there's a little bit more work happening here, just a little, but I want to be really fair in comparison to some of the other mid-drive systems from like Yamaha, Shimano, or Brose. And then at the higher speeds, you can hear it working more, and it's going to burn a little bit more power too, because this is the EMTB motor. It's the high power motor. So in some ways, I've been pretty satisfied with Tour or just Eco. So again, I think Riese Müller, they spec all the higher end motors. So they went with the CX because it's like, well, They've probably got a lot of them, and they use it for all their bikes, whether it's like a big, you know, even large and heavier cargo bike like Chris is riding, or a bike like this that's still pretty light and nimble, but heavier than your average city bike. Chris, would you mind maybe trading me off on this? Okay, so here we are, and this is the Paxter 40, right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, yeah. This one's fun. Got to review this a while back, and it's got the dual battery option and some of the cup holders.
Kind of the original New Vinci.
Oh, this has the original New Vinci. So you can see it, yeah, it's different branding, the C8, but it still has the little hill climber dude.
Right.
This is a good one.
It says Enviolo, and it's like all black. This supposedly it's actually something that's specific to Riese Müller. It's slightly different, their version, car traffic.
Chris, before you start off, can you do the lights? He's gonna turn on the lights here too. There we go. So it's got a couple LEDs for that backlight, and then there's the headlight. Very nice. Got the side cutout that I like. Go ahead, I'll follow you.
It.
Oh, there we go. Showing off the suspension a little bit. Sweet. I can even see it bobbing just a little bit when he's pedaling, so there's possibly some preload adjustment that could be done, but I like the cushion.
Oh yeah.
Okay guys, so there's that nice little like chainring cover. I really like that. It's sometimes you see like the extra long ones, but with this swing arm in the back, it would maybe get bumped, and I just don't know if it's necessary. I mean, your pants don't come back this far, so, you know, very thoughtfully done. Again, Kirana is who makes that. This is the carbon belt drive. These tend to be very durable. They can last like twice as long as chains. They're quiet, and they're not going to slap the chainstay as easily. It's a nice system. You know, in 170 millimeter crank arms, we got the Bosch motor up there, so you're going to hear it and you're going to see it spinning. It might be a little bit louder because you're mounted so close. You'll also see the suspension going up and down. They've got like a rigid rear triangle here, so there's like a single pivot design, and that's part of what makes the bike less flexy and less, you know, frame flex kind of going on. Comes back to that like extra welds and just that really tough, maybe a little bit heavier, but also stable, like comfortable. Those are some of the qualities that you get with this versus some of the really maybe cheaper full suspension bikes that don't have name brand stuff, that are really technically full suspension, but this feels better, and that's part of the price point. So here we go. Yeah, it performed really well. It's going up and off of those curbs and stuff. Shaking the frame around a little bit, changing gears so you could hear the sounds, sort of that motor feedback change if I was in a higher gear where, you know, the pedal cadence dropped down, the noise also dropped down. So yeah, it all depends where you're at. And again, I was in EMTB and actually turbo mode for that little test. Okay, so in this video I'm going to do some more shifting. You can listen for the sounds. The actual shifting mechanism is like right in here, so it's pretty well tucked away. You don't have a derailleur hanging down that could get damaged at bike racks or if the bike tips. I appreciate that. And then we got a 28 tooth belt ring here, 26 tooth like chain ring belt ring up front. So those are the specs. Let's do it. Very nice. And check out his body position. It's like super upright. He's not leaning over and kind of stressing his neck or back or anything. We do a brake test. Oh, nice, very good. That's those 180 millimeter hydraulic disc brakes. You probably saw there was some dive, so when he was stopping, the bike sort of, you know, it kind of suspends forward. It's not a bad thing, but that's where the lockout and the preload adjust comes in.
Yeah, and to some extent the suspension actually can help the braking a little bit as well.
Well, we're like out in the neighborhoods now. It's getting a little bit dark. We're probably going to take this home. But I appreciate it, Chris. Chris is letting me kind of crash at his place for a little while we cover the Riese Müller line. Really neat to see 2019, hot off the presses from Interbike. Definitely cool to see this new model.
Yeah, pretty excited about it. Interesting to see, you know, how people feel about it.
Yeah, and I welcome your feedback and corrections and stuff, you guys. I'm doing my best to be thorough and also just demonstrate how these bikes work. I'll see your updates and feedback in the comments or in the forums and stuff for Riese Müller. Have fun out there as always and ride safe.